Would Timo Werner's 2 years at Chelsea been seen as a success if the new offside rule was in place to judge his 28 goals, which were judged by VAR? Most of those offside goals in his first season, dubbed the unluckiest season ever. Timo Werner came to Chelsea with 133 goals and assists in 157 games. Those are some crazy stats, let's be real. And he left Chelsea with 44 goals and assists in 89 games, which isn't too bad when you look at the silverware he walked away with. But it'll be his misfortune with VAR and his offsides, which he endured, that will be remembered at Stamford Bridge. But there were 28 goals in particular in his 2 years there that were reviewed. And with the tightness of the offside law being relaxed in the new edition of the law, thanks to Arsene Wenger, it almost favours the attacker and would have seen a lot of Timo's goals actually stand. In that first season, to forget for Timo, 15 goals were brought back and chalked off. Of these goals, by the new law, this Premier League goal against Southampton would have stood, this Premier League goal at Newcastle would have stood, this Champions League goal against Rennes would have stood, this Prem goal against Spurs would have stood, this Prem goal against Leicester would have, this Prem goal against Liverpool would have, this Champions League goal against Real Madrid would have, this Prem goal against Leicester was tight, but with the new law, it would have. And this goal against Villa where his teammate was offside, which he eventually tapped in, would have also stood. Meaning that in his first season, he would have had an extra 7 Premier League goals, leaving him with 13, and 2 Champions League goals, leaving him with 6. And with him setting a record of 41 offsides that season, he may have had plenty more of assists, which we can't really comprehend in hindsight. That following season, Timo wasn't really favoured in the first team, but nevertheless 120 goals were directly affected by VAR that season, many involving offsides, which Timo also endured. And despite all this, you could say that these additional stats don't exactly light the world on fire, and it doesn't excuse some of the horrible misses that Timo somehow managed to pull off during his time in between his bad luck. But it can cause a ripple effect, which affects the player's confidence, which in turn affects the stats which people eventually look back on. For example, if you add on all these offside goals and potentially some of the terrible misses, which were brought on by a lack of confidence throughout the season, we could see the narrative for his first season completely change. With then say 24 goals and 21 assists, which is 45 goals and assists in 52 games in his initial season, and a Champions League winner medal, it doesn't seem so bad after all. This is comparable with Kaka 06-07. I mean, I'm not saying these are comparable in any way possible. 06-07 Kaka, absolute phenomenon, incredible player. But the stat shaggers will love that one. All of this possible because of going back to the offside law, which should have been the original way in the first place. This rule change, thanks to Arsene Wenger, will again revolutionise the game, with pacey attackers being back on their marks and defenders having to play a lower block. And despite even more controversy which will probably come from it for VAR, with them not being able to draw some kind of line between whatever the last body part is, as we know already, which we've endured for the last few years, I think it will bring back a positive to the modern game, with players like Timo thriving yet again. What could have beans? What kind of beans? Heinz beans, obviously. How can you eat Branston beans? It's like saying people actually eat any other type of mayo. Like, if you're not eating Hellman's mayo, like what it's like paint stripper. How can you do that? Anyway, why are we talking about that? Butterfly effects. Oh, you might as well stick around if you like that kind of stuff. We're not taking things too seriously. So yeah, that's just, you know.